The story we are going to talk about today is, quite frankly, pretty depressing. It reads like the most bizarre movie you've ever seen, but sadly it actually happened. What type of person raises a young girl telling everyone she is their daughter and then years later marries her? One of the most sadistic, evil men you'll ever hear about, that's who. This case also involves a missing person, unexplained death, and a murder. But I want most of the article to focus on the beautiful girl who was caught up in the storm. Let's talk about Sharon Marshall. This story has so many twists and turns with many dates and aliases, so I'll try my best to be as accurate as possible from what I've learned. My research was via old newspaper articles from the internet, but a lot of the information was taken from a couple of books that are exceptional that I want to mention. Matt Birkbeck has investigated this case extensively for years and written 2 books about it, so if you'd like to take a deep dive into this case, they are a must-read. The titles are A Beautiful Child and Finding Sharon. There is also a Netflix documentary about this bizarre case from 2022 titled Girl in the Picture. The 2 main characters in this story first came to be as Trenton Davis and his young daughter Suzanne, but bear in mind the names will change. They are first known to be seen together around 1974 in Washington State and then soon moved to Oklahoma City. Suzanne was a beautiful 5-year-old blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, and Trenton was a 31-year-old house painter. The duo never seemed to stay in one place for very long and were known to have lived in several states. Their names changed regularly too, and the reason why would eventually be evident. The first several years of the father and daughter's life together seemed uneventful, at least from what we know. They lived in numerous states and would take their different names, it was discovered, from deceased names off of headstones. In the mid-1980s, the 2 were living in Atlanta. They were then going by Warren and Sharon Marshall. Sharon was then in high school, and Clarence was a very controlling and unstable person that everyone who met seemed to dislike. Sharon herself was by all accounts an amazing and incredibly bright person. Several people talked about what a kind and wonderful friend she was, who would always encourage them to try their best. Sharon excelled at her schoolwork as well. She was ranked number 26 out of 350 in her high school class, as well as being a lieutenant colonel in the ROTC, and was awarded a full scholarship to Georgia Tech to study aerospace engineering. Her dream was to work for NASA. Sharon was over the moon at achieving some of her dreams, but then quickly things seemed to be falling apart. It was pretty evident as Sharon was in her later years of high school that she was pregnant. She denied it when asked, but then as her stomach grew, she did finally admit it to a close friend. The father was a guy she had been dating, thought to be Curtis Flurney. Sharon and her boyfriend had even attempted to run away to Alabama, but Warren quickly found them and took Sharon back with him. Warren and Sharon abruptly left town around 1986 and moved to Arizona. Sharon had the baby there, a boy, who was said to have been adopted out by 2 wealthy Texas doctors that her father had found. Once again on the move, the 2 found themselves in Tampa, Florida. Their new names there were Clarence Hughes and Tanya Dawn Hughes. Clarence always told people he was a painter, but often complained of having a bad back and being unable to work. He then made his daughter, Tanya, work as a stripper at a club called Mons Venus to support them. As always, Tanya was very highly thought of at her work, both by the customers as well as the co-workers, as being a very kind and friendly person willing to talk to anyone. In 1988, Tanya was once again pregnant. The father was a man she was dating when they lived in Arizona, whom she did not tell about the pregnancy. She had decided to keep this baby, and so Michael Gregory Marshall was born on April 21st, 1988. By all accounts, Tanya was a very devoted and loving mother, and Michael was her whole world. Clarence had an affection for Michael as well, but couldn't deal with his crying or any kind of outburst from him, so Tanya would always quickly deal with them so as not to anger her father. One of the fellow strippers at Mons Venus whom Tanya had befriended was a young woman named Sharon Camesso. She did spend some time with Clarence and Tanya at their trailer, and her and Clarence even dated very briefly. They were on a boat one day where a fight escalated and Warren assaulted Camesso, but she was able to get away. Cheryl then retaliated for the assault by calling social services to tell them that Tanya was collecting welfare but made more than $1,500 a week being a nude dancer. Social services did suspend their benefits pending an investigation. Clarence was enraged. About a week later, Cheryl left her dad's house to stay with a friend. She promised to call him in the morning, but never did. Her Corvette was found abandoned at the airport soon after, and Cheryl Camesso was reported as a missing person. Within a few weeks of Camesso's disappearance, Clarence and Tanya were once again on the move. This time they moved to New Orleans. While they were there, their trailer in Florida burned to the ground, and it was thought to be arson. The couple were now going by Clarence Hughes and Tanya Tadlock. Another interesting thing happened when they got to New Orleans. They got married. The couple, who had for years posed as father and daughter, were now husband and wife. Clarence would say that he did it to give Tanya's son Michael a name, but as information would come out later, there was a more sinister reason that was much more probable. Somewhere around this time, Tanya gave birth to another child. This one was a girl, eventually named Megan, who was adopted by a childless couple in New Orleans. Not much is known of the father of this child, but we'll talk about her daughter a little more as the story unfolds. The couple next moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tanya was working at a strip club called Passions to support her now husband and son. As before, Tanya made friends wherever she went, and everyone around her hated her husband. He wasn't allowed in this club as he had been banned. There was an angry exchange of words one night between a fellow stripper and Clarence. She had shouted something to him about his wife should leave him, and Clarence's response was, "If she ever left me, I'd kill the bitch." Tanya was dating someone named Kevin Brown while working at the club. She had always wanted to leave Clarence, but had such a fear of him, and even more so fear of what he would do to Michael if she ever left him, that she continued to stay. It did appear, though, that with the support of her new boyfriend, Kevin, that Tanya was actually planning to leave her husband this time. However, she wouldn't live to see the plan through. The details around Tanya's accident seem pretty vague. It appears that Tanya, Clarence, and Michael were living in a motel. Tanya had walked to the store that night to get some groceries and was later found unconscious on a busy Oklahoma City highway sometime after midnight on April 25, 1990. It had appeared that she had been hit by a car. Clarence was asleep in the motel, he claims, when the accident happened. She was rushed to the hospital and never fully regained consciousness. Tanya's friends from the strip club wanted to go see her at the hospital, but Clarence tried to ban all visitors. They were able to get a few quick visits in when her husband was distracted. Tanya seemed to be getting better, and it was noted that her husband was in the hospital room alone with her the night before. By the next morning, her vitals were failing, and she died of her injuries 5 days after her accident. In addition to many old bruises and various injuries, the autopsy also showed Tanya has had several prior pregnancies as well as breast and butt implants. The cause of death was a severe closed head injury. The doctor had his doubts as to whether her injuries were sustained by a car and classified her death as a homicide. Clarence didn't seem to show any emotion at the death of his young wife. He wanted her cremated and to take care of things quickly. The owner of the Passions Club, as well as her co-workers, insisted on giving her a funeral and a proper headstone at their expense. There was so much mystery about their young friend, who was now dead, but they did their best to honor her life and gave her a nice service. Clarence did show up at her service with bodyguards and went on a tangent, being verbally abusive to many of the people there, ranting and raving, and seemed annoyed his wife's funeral was even happening. Clarence claimed he needed some time to grieve his wife and asked social services to take Michael for a week while he took care of some things. Before that, he had also reportedly called the adopted parents of Tanya's daughter Megan to see if they wanted Michael, and they seemed interested, but he never followed up. Surprisingly, Clarence also contacted Michael's biological father, Greg Higgs, who didn't know he even had a son, to see if he wanted Michael. Shocked at hearing of Tanya's death and that he had a son he didn't even know about, he agreed to take him. Clarence said he'd be in touch soon, but never contacted him again. Social services did take Michael in, and one of the first things Clarence did was to call the life insurance companies to try to claim the $80,000 in life insurance policies he had taken out on his wife months prior. The life insurance company asked him for a social security number for verification, and the first few he gave them didn't match up. He did finally give them the correct one, but Clarence knew his secret was now out. The number he gave them came back to federal fugitive Franklin Delano Floyd. I don't wish to focus on Floyd's backstory, but he was very troubled from the beginning, so I will give a brief synopsis. In 1962, at age 19, he was convicted of abducting and sexually assaulting a 4-year-old girl and was sentenced to 10 to 20 years. He was placed in a state mental hospital where he escaped by stealing a car. The next day, he robbed a bank. He was recaptured and released in 1972 and sent to a halfway house. While there, he attempted to abduct a woman at a gas station. He was arrested and made bail, and when he didn't show up for court in 1973, a federal warrant was issued for his arrest. Franklin Delano Floyd, now knowing his real identity was out, did flee Oklahoma, but was picked up a few months later in Georgia, where he was ordered to serve out his sentence. When Floyd asked social services to care for Michael temporarily after his mother's death, they were absolutely appalled at his condition. He was nonverbal and would scream and moan and beat his head on the ground repeatedly. DHS had even wanted to charge Floyd for abuse. He was given to the loving care of longtime foster parents Ernest and Merle Bean. They were overwhelmed at first and even considered declining, but they realized how much Michael needed them and agreed to keep him. Franklin Delano Floyd wouldn't make it easy, however. He had always insisted that he was Michael's father, and with how private him and Michael's mother's life was, everyone just believed it. Michael was even ordered to go to prison regularly to visit Floyd, even though by Michael's actions, he clearly did not want to go. Floyd vowed as soon as he got out of prison, he was going to get his son back and turn his life around. In all of the legal wrangling of custody of Michael, a DNA test was ordered. Floyd balked at this, and it was soon evident why. Tests confirmed that he was not Michael's biological father. All mandatory visitation was halted. Ernest and Merle Bean had lovingly taken care of Michael for over 4 years now, and eventually he had started thriving. They were now interested in adopting him and making him a permanent part of their family. Floyd also knew now that when he was released from prison, and it being determined that he was not the father, he would never get custody of Michael like he had expected. So he put a sinister plan into action. In early September of 1994, Franklin Floyd was now out of prison. Ernest and Merle Bean were worried because they knew that Floyd wanted Michael back and was capable of anything. Merle even thought she saw Floyd drive by their house in early September and called the police. Floyd got up on September 12, 1994, with the plan to finally get Michael back. He showed up at Indian Meridian Elementary School in Oklahoma and talked to the principal, James Davis. He showed him a gun and said he wanted him and his son Michael to come with him. Everything was handled calmly and no one at the school was aware of what was going on. The three fled in the principal's truck and stopped it at an area only a few miles from the school, which also happened to be very close to Ernest and Merle Bean's house. He tied the principal to a tree, and Floyd said he would call someone in 2 hours to free him. Then he took Michael and left in James Davis's truck. It would be the last time anyone would ever see Michael Hughes. Word got out that Floyd had abducted Michael, and a frantic search was underway. The principal was able to summons help quickly and was freed from the tree and escaped unharmed. 2 months later, Floyd was found and arrested in Louisville, Kentucky, but Michael was not with him. Floyd had told differing stories, but usually said a friend that he trusted was raising Michael. Floyd's sister said he told her he had killed Michael at a motel, but at this point, nothing was really believed or could be verified. Michael Hughes was a missing child. Floyd was convicted of the kidnapping and sentenced to 52 years in prison. Around the time of Floyd's kidnapping trial, it was found out that Floyd had abandoned the principal's truck the next month in Texas. Then someone from Kansas purchased the truck at an auction. As the mechanic was working on the undercarriage of the truck, they found a manila envelope taped up near the gas tank. What was inside was not to be believed. The mechanic opened the envelope, and to his horror, inside were about 97 photos. They were sickening. Most of them were underage female dressed in sexual clothing and posing provocatively. Sadly, the photos of the young girl were none other than Floyd's daughter/wife, Tanya Tadlock. There were some other pictures in the envelope that were horrific. Pictures of a woman who was blindfolded and bound. The victim was being tortured and had been burned, beaten, and was near death. She was also posed provocatively. After some investigating, it was soon revealed the unknown victim in the photos was Sharon Camesso. Around the same time the envelope full of pictures was found, unidentified remains were found along Interstate 275 in St. Petersburg, Florida. Between unidentified remains being located and the unidentified person in the photos, it was soon determined the skeletal remains found belonged to Sharon Camesso. Aside from the torture depicted in the photos, she was ultimately killed by 2 gunshots to the head. Franklin Floyd was charged and convicted of the first-degree murder of Sharon Camesso and was sentenced to die by lethal injection. It isn't clear what part, if any, that Floyd made Tanya play in the murder and disposal of Camesso. There is a theory why the marriage between Floyd and Tanya took place, though. Floyd knew that a wife couldn't be forced to testify against her husband, and they were married just weeks after the murder. Now that Franklin Floyd had been exposed for all of his horrible crimes and is locked away for life, there were still a few important questions that needed to be answered. The FBI would work tirelessly to try to find out where Michael Hughes was and who Sharon Marshall, Tanya Hughes, etc. really was. Several females had been researched over the years, and many DNA tests were done, but none proved to be a match. Franklin Floyd had been interviewed many times, and he was never willing to talk, or what he said could not be believed. Then in 2014, 2 FBI agents decided to take another crack at Floyd and ask him questions about the 2 matters only he had the answers to. They did a lot of prep work ahead of time and planned on staying in the area a few days and talked to Floyd each day. It was very stressful, as Floyd would spend most of his time ranting and calling them every name in the book and being combative. The FBI agents were very patient, and to their amazement, Floyd eventually actually told them the real story of how he came to have Sharon. It began in 1974 when Floyd, then going by Brandon Cleo Williams, met a woman at a truck stop diner named Sandra Shipman. She was a prostitute and said she had lost her 3 daughters to the state. Floyd told her he'd marry her and help get her kids back, so they married in 1974 after meeting only 2 weeks prior. Soon all 5 of them shortly traveled to Pennsylvania to stay with family. The little girls were Suzanne, Allison, and Amy, and ages were 5, 3, and 2. The family moved around frequently, and while living in Texas, Sandra Shipman was arrested for a bounce check. She had to spend a few weeks in jail, and when she got out, her husband and 3 daughters were gone. She would soon find Allison and Amy in a nearby Baptist children's home, but her husband and her oldest daughter, Suzanne Savakis, were gone. The FBI was completely shocked at getting Floyd to finally reveal a decades-old question. They were able to verify the marriage certificate and even track down Suzanne's birth parents for a DNA test, which did confirm she was their biological child. The huge question was, of course, why wasn't Suzanne Savakis ever reported missing? When the FBI spoke to Suzanne's birth mother, they were not impressed. She would claim that she really didn't think she was kidnapped since her stepfather took her, but seemed to have no interest or emotion about her daughter that she had just found out was deceased. Even at the time of Suzanne's disappearance, Sandra Shipman's father and brother Jim wanted to find her, but Sandra wasn't willing to help, so their efforts were not successful. Talking to Suzanne's birth father was a very different story. Clifford Savakis was briefly married to Sandra. He went into the military and was able to visit Suzanne a few times when she was young, but ultimately the marriage didn't work out. He was asked to sign over parental rights when she remarried, and he thought that would be the best for his daughter, so he agreed. After hearing what actually happened to his daughter and the life she led and what ultimately happened to her, he was absolutely devastated. The FBI agents had one more task in their interview. They needed to know where Michael was. At one point, growing tired from his usual ranting and raving, Floyd did appear to finally tell the story of what happened to Michael. He said that after he left the principal tied to the tree, Michael wouldn't stop screaming. He wanted Mama Bean, which was Merle Bean, and as in the past, Floyd couldn't take Michael screaming. It was clear to him that Michael no longer had an attachment to him, and the happy ending he envisioned was not going to happen. He said he shot Michael in the back of the head 2 times to make it real quick. He drew the agents a map to where he said he laid Michael down. When they visited the area with other agents to do a thorough search, the area was exactly as Floyd had described, but it being 20 years later, no trace of Michael was found. It was noted that there were wild hogs known to be in that area, and if that was the case back then, not even bones would have been left behind. With Sharon/Tanya finally having her true identity revealed, it was decided to give her a new headstone, this time with her family members and other important people in attendance. It was a very touching service with many people showing up, including Michael's biological father, Ernest and Merle Bean, Clifford Savakis, Suzanne's daughter Megan, as well as friends, Matt Birkbeck, co-workers, and law enforcement officials who worked so hard on the case also attended. Suzanne's headstone had now been replaced with a new one with her actual name. A particularly touching moment at the service happened when Suzanne's father, Clifford, got to meet his granddaughter Megan, the baby Suzanne had given up for adoption, for the first time. It was also revealed at the service that Megan was pregnant and would soon be having a son. To honor the brother that she never got to meet, she would name him Michael. As far as my thoughts on this case, as many will agree, I find it sickening. When you read about the story, the focus is always on Franklin Floyd, as well as is the Unsolved Mysteries interview done with him. I understand that as he was at the center of all the horrible things that occurred, I wanted to shine more of a light on Sharon Marshall and all the things she excelled at and the positive influence she put out in her short time on this earth. It was so horrible what Suzanne, Michael, and Cheryl had to endure. However, it does feel like a sense of closure in this case in some ways. The most important thing is that Franklin Delano Floyd will never be able to hurt another human being. After spending over 20 years on death row, he died of natural causes at the Union Correctional Institution in Rayford, Florida in January of 2023. Suzanne Savakis finally has her identity back and reunited, so to speak, with her family. It was now known what probably happened to Michael, and Cheryl Camesso's family knows where their loved one is and was able to lay her to rest. Suzanne Savakis was only on this earth for 20 years, yet she left such a lasting impression on those around her. She had to endure in her life horrors we can't even begin to imagine, but still managed to be a loving soul who put out kindness in this world. Considering the monster who raised her, Sharon Marshall, now discovered to be Suzanne Savakis, was definitely a light in the darkness. Now I wanted to talk about 2 recent updates on cases I've previously released podcasts on that I think you'll find interesting. First is the update on the Dale Williams case. If you recall, he was the family man from Nucla, Colorado, who was seemingly lured away from his body shop with a call from a stranded motorist in 1999 and was never seen again. It was mentioned that a former friend had an issue with Dale concerning the friend's now ex-wife. In October of 2024, 25 years after Dale's disappearance, this ex-friend, now revealed to be 68-year-old Dan Bishop, was finally arrested and charged with first-degree murder in Dale Williams' 1999 disappearance. Some more details have also been released, and although not verified to be 100% accurate, they were mentioned in various newspaper articles, so I will share them. It was said that when Dale's truck was found, there was a .22 caliber rifle found in the bed of the truck with a shell casing in the chamber. According to firearm purchase records, the rifle belonged to Bishop. It is also thought that Bishop's now deceased cousin was also complicit in the crime, but his name was not released. There is also mention in a few different articles that Dale Williams may have had a prior affair with Bishop's then wife, but it was not believed to be going on around the time of his disappearance. Bishop is awaiting trial, and hopefully Dale's family can get some semblance of justice and his remains can be located so his family can give him a proper resting place. The second update is about a couple that I just released a podcast on a few weeks ago. In fact, in a chilling coincidence, the exact day my podcast on them was released was the exact same day they were found. The couple is Charles and Catherine Romer. When I posted on my Facebook page about the podcast, a man named Jason Surata replied that he had found them that day. I am so glad to hear that they have finally been found and can receive a proper burial. However, a few questions remain, namely, what in the world took so long? Jason told me that he located them in a retention pond just 50 yards away from the Holiday Inn where they checked into 44 years ago on the same property. I don't know whether it was checked and missed or just now checked, but it defies logic to me as it should have been the first place that they looked. As you can imagine, the Romer's family is glad to have their loved ones located. Here is a statement from Catherine's granddaughter, Kristen Seaman Heller. We are deeply saddened and equally relieved that our grandparents, Charles and Catherine Romer's 44-year mystery disappearance has been solved. While this discovery brings closure, it still has been very emotional. Sadly, Charles Romer Jr., Jim Romer, and Frank Heller are not with us to share this momentous turn of events and to know their parents will finally be laid to rest in peace. We want to express our gratitude to Glenn County Police, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and Sunshine State Sonar for their time, dedication, and expertise. A special appreciation and thanks goes out to Jason Surata of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Jason pinpointed the exact location of the vehicle and shared his findings with all the agencies involved. That concludes this episode of Lost and Found Podcast. You can find the podcast on Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcast. I also now have a Patreon page with exclusive content under the same spelling. I try to release a new podcast every 2 weeks, and you can reach me at Lost and Found Podcast at Yahoo. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.